So nice. Rabbi Baruch Chait doing his song Malchuscha, Your Kingship. What a beautiful song from his album called Salonika, the voice of Salonika. How's everybody doing? It's great to be with you. Let's light up the darkness. Big day. Our 900th episode. How many pages in the Daf Yomi journey? 1 page a day, going through the entire Talmud over 7.5 years. 2,711. We're at 900. So we're, basically 1/3, another few days, and we'll be 1/3 through this journey with God's help. It's great to be on this journey with you, my holy sisters and brothers. Who's in the house today? Lucy in West Virginia, Stephen in New Hampshire, Sharon in New Jersey, Cecil saying Shalom, Shandor in the Bronx, Renee in Indiana, Clarice says Erev Tov, good evening. Paul in the Great Northwest, Melissa in Great Neck, Ruth in Kentucky, Malka in Pennsylvania, Paula in Chicago, James in Annapolis. Paula says, good luck, Sal, dance. Thank you. This is one of our Yid shirts available at our store. There's definitely a link to that on the Facebook page and on our website. Or am I? Or accidentaltalmudist.org. Nina will put a link in the comments. We have lots of really cool t-shirts. They're great conversation starters. Let's see. Elise in Niagara, Canada. John in the Pacific Northwest. And Sue Strauss in the house from Chicago. Over there on the YouTube side, Faith checking in and saying shalom. Welcome, everybody. We're starting a new chapter. We're here in Tractate Yevamos, the 14th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of levirate marriage. Today, opening chapter 13 with Daf Kuf Zayin, page 107. This volume has 122 pages, so we're definitely in the home stretch here. So this chapter will touch somewhat upon levirate marriage, what happens when a man dies, having not had a child, leaving a widow and a brother, and they have that levirate obligation to marry each other or perform the alternative mitzvah of chalitza, a ceremony which releases them from that obligation to each other. But now that we're talking about marriage, we've seen a lot of digressions on the laws of marriage that sometimes touch on yibum, levirate marriage. And we've already mentioned a bunch of times what happens when a minor girl is married by her family to a man before she is an adult. They can marry her off or betroth her and then marry her, but she has a right of refusal. This was radical in the ancient world when the Torah was given, to empower women and even young women, daughters, with this right of refusal was a big deal in the ancient world. So we open chapter 13 here with Mishnah number 1 in our 900th episode of AT Daily. The sages decreed, in the case of a minor girl whose father died, her mother or brothers may marry her off. However, such a marriage does not have the same legal status as the marriage of an adult. Therefore, if the minor regrets having married, she is allowed to make a declaration of refusal to her husband, thereby annulling the marital bond. And it's important to say that she's not ending the marital bond, she is annulling it. What's the difference? If she's ending the marriage, then the husband has to give her a bill of divorce. She's now a divorcee, and she's disqualified from marrying a Kohen, a priest, who's not permitted to marry a divorcee. But if, as a minor, she gives this declaration of refusal, the marriage is annulled as if it had never been. She is not a divorcee, and she remains permitted to marry a priest. The sages disagreed, however, with the details, with respect to the details of this law. Beis Shammai say Only betrothed girls may refuse. A girl may refuse upon reaching adulthood to remain married to a man to whom her mother or brothers married her as a minor after the death of her father. Beis Hillel say that both betrothed and fully married girls may refuse. So betrothal, erusin, marriage, nisuin. Betrothal is like marriage in the sense that once a couple is betrothed, even though they haven't consummated that union, even though they haven't stood under the chuppah, the wedding canopy, they are considered married in the sense that she becomes prohibited to every other man in the world. And if they break off the betrothal, they need a bill of divorce, and she becomes a divorcee. Fully married means that either they consummated that union or stood under the wedding canopy. So there was this disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel that the right of refusal is only for betrothal, but once she becomes married, she doesn't have that right of refusal anymore. That's Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel say even upon marriage to this minor, she can still refuse it and get out of it, and that is the law. The halacha follows Beis Hillel in this, as in most things. Beis Shammai say refusal may be directed only at her husband and not at her yavam, right? So even as a minor girl, she might have not refused a husband, so she was married to this husband, and while still a minor, that husband died and he left a brother. So now we see how yibum touches on this body of law, that she now has a yavam. She is a yavama from that first marriage, and now, even though she's a widow, she's still a minor, and does she have a right to refuse her yavam, right? Or does she need to perform chalitza with him? So Beis Shammai say, right of refusal is with respect to a husband, not a yavam. But Beis Hillel say, it may take place either in his presence or in his absence. I'm sorry, skip the paragraph. Beis Hillel say it may be directed at her husband or her yavam. So she can also use this right of refusal for a yavam, meaning she won't have to perform chalitza with him. She can remain a widow from the first husband, but she doesn't become a chalutza from the second husband, and a chalutza is equivalent to a divorcee. So therefore, she will, with this right of refusal given to the yavam, she remains qualified to marry a priest. Beis Shammai say the refusal must take place specifically in the presence of the husband, but Beis Hillel say it may take place either in his presence or in his absence. Beis Shammai say the refusal must take place specifically in court, but Beis Hillel say it may take place either in court or not in court, and the law follows Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, she may refuse as long as she is a minor, even 4 or 5 times if her relatives married her off again to another man after each refusal. Beis Shammai said to them, the daughters of Israel are not to be treated with disregard and should not be passed from one man to another. Rather, she refuses once, and then she must wait until she reaches majority and refuse and marry, right? Once she gives the refusal once, now her relatives can't marry her off to anyone, so that it would even come up that she could refuse again. But Beis Hillel don't go that far. They can marry her off again, even while she's a minor, and she retains that right of refusal. That's Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 13. The Gemara. And before I go further, let me remind you, I mentioned before, there's no class tomorrow. So after tonight, we'll reconvene again at the regular Friday time of noon Pacific. For that reason, we're going to do about a page and a half today and a page and a half on Friday. And so at the end of Friday, we'll be caught up, having done the missing day by doing half of it today and the other half at the beginning of Friday. Okay, the Gemara on Mishnah number 1 of chapter 13. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, what is the reason of Beis Shammai for ruling that a married minor girl may not perform refusal? It is once she's married as opposed to just betrothed. It is because there are no conditions with regard to marriage. Although a betrothal can be conditional, the condition is nullified upon consummation of the marriage. Right? If you say, I will betroth you on condition that I have enough money to support you, or I will betroth you on condition that you don't come into our marriage with certain vows that I think you should not, have bearing upon you, or that you bring a dowry into the marriage, something like that. So that can be a conditional betrothal. But then once they get married, even if that condition was something that, could be set to happen or not happen in the future, once the marriage takes place, according to one opinion, that's it. There's no more conditions. When you got married, you said, I waive all conditions. But that's not going to be a universal opinion, right? So Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, what is the reason of Beis Shammai? Beis Shammai for ruling that a married minor girl can no longer perform refusal. It is because we hold that there are no conditions with regard to marriage. Although a betrothal can be conditional, the condition is nullified upon consummation of the marriage. Likewise, marriage cannot be conditional, as the sexual relationship is not subject to conditions, right? One way to consummate the marriage, to go from marriage to betrothal, is to stand under the chuppah, to exchange vows under the wedding canopy. But another way to go from betrothal to marriage is that they sleep together, right? They've consummated the union, now they're married. And likewise, marriage cannot be conditional as the sexual relationship. Once they're married, they're fully permitted to have sex together, and you can't make that subject to conditions. And if a married minor girl would then refuse after having had sex with her husband, so other people would look on this relationship, and they might mistakenly think that this to be a condition with regard to the marriage of an adult woman. And they will come to say that there can be a condition with regard to marriage, that a woman, there could be some condition that it lapsed or never came into fruition, and that's why she could just walk away from the marriage without a get, without a bill of divorce. And we don't allow that. Only a minor can perform this refusal. And so Beis Shammai said, let's be consistent. The minor might have had sex with her husband, and so at that point she should lose the right of refusal. But Beis Hillel say, no, she's a minor. Even if she had sex with her husband, consensual sex, hard for us to understand that a minor could have consensual sex. We deem that rape. But again, in the ancient world, the lifespan was a lot shorter. So girls were married very young. Okay, so the Gemara asks, but what is there to say if she entered the marriage canopy but did not yet engage in sexual intercourse? The marriage goes into effect even though it has not been consummated. And the Gemara replies, there are no conditions with regard to a wedding canopy. Once you're married, you're married. But that's going to be different if she's a minor. So the Gemara asks further, but what is there to say if the father delivered his daughter to the agents of the husband to be married? Right, so it might be that a father married off his daughter to a husband, but the husband lives in another city, and so he sent her with these agents that the husband sent to pick up the wife or the fiancée at that point, and bring her back to the town where she's going to live with her husband. Once the father delivers her into the domain of the husband, in this case, the domain of the husband is measured by the agents sent by the husband to pick up the bride, she's actually technically considered married right then and there. So, but what is there to say if the father delivered his daughter to the agents of the husband to be married, so that she was considered married even before the chuppah, even before the marriage ceremony took place? So the Gemara answers, the sages did not distinguish between different circumstances, and no marriages are conditional. So it would follow that refusal cannot take place for this minor girl once she is married. But that's the opinion of Beis Shammai. And with regard to Beis Hillel, what is their reasoning? That a minor girl can refuse even after she's been married, not just betrothed but married. So it is known that marriage of a minor girl is by rabbinic law only. And therefore, no one would confuse this type of marriage with the marriage of an adult woman. So Rabbah and Rav Yosef both say, Beis Shammai's reason is that a man would not readily render his sexual act into licentious sexual intercourse. If he had intercourse with the minor girl, and the marriage was later retroactively annulled by her declaration of refusal, then the sex that they had they would have had it outside the context of marriage, right? Because the refusal annuls the marriage as if it had never existed. But if they had sex during this marriage that was then rendered non-existent, so then what was that sex? It was extramarital, licentious sex. And that's a good reason not to marry a minor girl. Even if it's permitted, you should wait. So the Gemara asks, what is there to say if she entered the marriage canopy but did not engage in sexual intercourse? As this reason would not apply in such a case. And the Gemara answers, it would not be satisfactory for him, i.e. the husband, if this would be a forbidden marriage canopy, because if the marriage is later annulled by her refusal, he will have stood under the marriage canopy with a woman who was not permitted to him. And the Gemara asks, what is there to say if the father delivered his daughter to the agents of the husband? And the Gemara answers, the sages did not distinguish between such circumstances and a regular marriage. And how do Beis Hillel respond to Beis Shammai? Since there is both betrothal and a marriage contract in this case, no one will come to say that his sexual act was licentious intercourse. Okay, at the time that they had sex, they were considered married. They stood under they were betrothed, and then they stood under the chuppah, and they were considered married. And then they had sex, but because she's a minor, she retains that right of refusal, and if she exercises it, then everyone will understand that she was a minor, married to an adult man, they had sex, but then she exercised her right of refusal, and everything was legal every step of the way. So the primary reason that Beis Shammai prohibit refusal after marriage is because it would render the sexual relationship during the marriage into a licentious one. But Beis Hillel do not regard sexual activity under such circumstances as licentious. So there is no stigma attached to having stood under a wedding canopy with a girl who later refuses the marriage. Rav Papa said the reasoning for Beis Shammai's opinion is because of the profits from the property she brings into the marriage. And the reasoning for Beis Hillel's opinion is also because of the profits from her property. So now they're saying, well, the reason that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai differ on whether this minor girl can refuse after an actual marriage has taken place is not so much the sexual implications of it, but rather the contractual financial implications of it. And what do they mean? And they explain. So the reasoning for Beis Shammai's opinion is because of the profits from her property. For if you say that a married minor girl may perform refusal, then the husband of that minor might seize those profits from her and consume them, as ultimately she stands to leave him if she refuses him later. In the meantime, he will try to extract as much profit as he can, since the husband is entitled to the benefit of the property that a woman brings into the marriage. She will leave the marriage with that property, but any interest that it throws off or crops that these fields deliver, he might think, well, I've only got her for a short time because she might refuse me. I'll just exploit this financially as much as I can. And Beis Hillel say, on the contrary, since you say she may refuse, he will seek to improve her property, because he will think, if I do not do so, her relatives will advise her to refuse me, and they will take her from me. Right? So it's in his best interest to be a really good husband who's a good custodian of her property, and that seeks to benefit it so that her relatives will advise her, yeah, you married a good guy, don't use that right of refusal. So Rava said, this is the reasoning of Beis Shammai. Right? A different explanation for why Beis Shammai say she loses the right of refusal after marriage. This is the reasoning of Beis Shammai according to Rava. A man will not bother to make a marriage feast and then lose it. If the wife is entitled to refuse him even after marriage, the man will not be willing to marry a minor and bear the expenses of the wedding when it is uncertain that she will stay with him. And Beis Hillel reason as follows: the marriage is convenient for both of them, even if it is nullified later, so as to generate publicity about them that they are married. And I guess they would receive gifts. So it's very, very kind of like realpolitik, real world considerations. And you see that there's an underlying value here that it might benefit her to be in a marriage even though she's a minor. And I mean, this is happening in a situation, right, where her mother or brothers are marrying her off. Why not the father? Because the father's dead, right? So this could very much be an impoverished household. That might make them a little bit desperate, but I mean, it might also benefit her to now be married into a family that is substantial and can really provide for her. Obviously, it's circumstance specific how good or bad it is for this particular individual. New subject. It is taught in the Mishnah, Beis Shammai say, refusal, this declaration of refusal, may be directed only at her husband and not at her yavam. If she wishes to refuse her yavam, right after her husband dies, so like any other widow, she must perform chalitza in order to dissolve the levirate bond. But Beis Hillel say that she can use that declaration of refusal whether for a husband or for a yavam. So even if as a minor she's widowed from that first husband and now comes before his brother for yibum, she doesn't have to perform chalitza if she doesn't want to. She could just say, I'm a minor, I don't want to be with that man. Done. No chalitza necessary. Rabbi Oshaya said a minor Yevama, this widow, may direct a refusal against a levirate betrothal, but she may not direct a refusal against the levirate bond. Before the Yavam betroths her, she cannot nullify the levirate bond by refusal. And Rav Chisda said, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Oshaya? In the case of levirate betrothal, which is consensual, that she can nullify. But with regard to the levirate bond, which applies to her even against her will, she cannot nullify it, right? Who imposes the levirate bond on her? God, right? Her husband died, so she has a levirate bond with his brother. And so the declaration of refusal, I mean, it's also used against a husband that was imposed on her by her family, but it's different imposed on her by her family than by God, as it were. But the law does not follow Rabbi Oshai, it follows Beis Hillel. Now the Gemara asks, but the consummation of the levirate bond may be against her will, and she can nullify that, as she can subsequently refuse the Yavam with whom she entered into yibum. Rather, the reasoning is, with regard to consummation of yibum and levirate betrothal, both of which he performs, she can nullify them. But with regard to the levirate bond, which God imposes upon her, the merciful one imposes it upon her at the death of her first husband, that she cannot nullify. Whereas Ula said she may direct her refusal even to his levirate bond. And what is the reason? By refusing, she nullifies the original marriage rather than the levirate bond that resulted from the death of her husband. So that's interesting. It's another reason that supports Beis Hillel's position that she can direct a declaration of refusal at her yavam and just get out of it without chalitza. Here, what Ula is saying is when she issues this declaration of refusal after her husband died and left her a widow and left a brother as her yavam, her declaration of refusal at that point doesn't nullify the bond of yibum. Rather, it retroactively nullifies her original marriage to her husband, as if that marriage never existed, and therefore she's not a widow. She was never married to him, so she's not a widow who comes before her brother-in-law for yibum. We're on 107b. Rava raised an objection to the statement made by Ula. It is taught in a baraisa in any case of yibum in which a minor girl is forbidden to the yavam, and she could perform refusal, but does not perform refusal, her rival wife performs chalitza and may not enter into yibum. And Rava continues, why? Why is this? Let her perform refusal now and nullify the first marriage retroactively, so that the so-called rival wife was never really a rival wife of a forbidden relative at all. And let her, right, see, if she's prohibited to her yavam, what does that mean? It means that she had some other familial relationship with the brother-in-law, other than just the brother of her deceased husband. She's prohibited to him because they're related through some other relationship. And therefore, at that point, as we've learned before, if a wife is prohibited, right, if a widow is prohibited, she's exempt. She can certainly not perform yibum. She's prohibited to that man, and therefore she doesn't need to perform chalitza, and she exempts a co-wife or a rival wife. If the man had two wives when he died, one of them is prohibited to the yavam, the other one is exempt as well. But because she's a minor, right, that throws a wrinkle into it, and that's why they're saying, well, she could perform a right of refusal, she could perform declaration of refusal, but because she's a minor, we're going to say that the rival wife is not exempt, and she could perform chalitza or even yibum. Right, so Rava continues. Why? Let her perform refusal now and nullify the first marriage retroactively so that the rival wife was never really a rival wife of a forbidden relative at all. And then the rival wife could enter into yibum with the brother-in-law. So the Gemara answers, a rival wife of a forbidden relative is different due to a rabbinic decree. As Rami Bar Yecheskel taught in a Baraisa, a minor girl who refuses her husband is permitted to his father because the marriage was annulled. Right? Very interesting. If you've ever been married to a man and then, you're widowed or divorced from him, can you marry that man's father? No. He will be a prohibited relative forever. But if you were married to this man when you were a minor, and then you make a declaration of refusal, so that annuls the marriage as if you were never married to that man, and you would remain permitted to his father if the girl chose to marry him. But one who refuses a yavam, that does not create the same circumstance, I guess because she was married to the original husband. So that would say that when it's not by Ula's reasoning, right? It's not that she is declaring the original marriage retroactively void, but rather she's directing this refusal, this declaration of refusal at her yavam. And therefore, she was married to his brother, and now their father remains prohibited to her. So evidently at the time, when she happens before her yavam for levirate marriage, she appears to be his father's daughter-in-law, and since people would not understand that her refusal later on would annul her first marriage, so even if you say that we are annulling the first marriage, she still cannot be permitted to the father because people might misunderstand the situation, that appearance of impropriety. So here too, in a case, for example, of the rival wife of a girl who was married to her uncle, that's the prohibited relationship that makes her exempt from yibum and chalitza. Since at the time she happened before the girl's father for yibum, she appears to be his daughter's rival wife, so the sages decreed that even if the girl refuses her original marriage, the rival wife is forbidden to this girl's father because of the appearance of impropriety. New subject. Rav said, a minor girl who refuses this yavam, who married her in yibum, is forbidden to that yavam, his brother, just as it is in a case concerning a yavama who has received a bill of divorce from one of the yavamim, right? So a man dies, leaves a widow and multiple brothers. So if she refuses one of the brothers who came before her for yibum, right? It wasn't chalitza. If she performed chalitza with one of the brothers, she's definitely prohibited to all the brothers. If she performed yibum with one of the brothers, she's prohibited to the other brothers, obviously. If she does a declaration of refusal against one of the yevamim, right, one of her brothers-in-law, so what did she do? Did she direct the refusal at him, or did she annul the original marriage? If she annulled the original marriage, so she should remain prohibited to the other brothers because she was never married to their brother, or not, right? So Rav said that the girl who refuses one yavam becomes prohibited to the other brothers, right? To the other yavamim. Just as in the case of a yavama who receives a bill of divorce from one of the yavamim. Is it not so that since the yavama who has received a bill of divorce is forbidden to one of them, i.e. the one who gave her the divorce, she is forbidden to all of them? And here too, it is no different. But Shmuel said, if she refused this yavam, she is permitted to that one. And it is not comparable to a yavama who received a bill of divorce. For in the case of this yavama who has received a bill of divorce, it is he, the yavam, who performed the act giving the bill of divorce to her, and he thereby renders her forbidden to his other brothers. But in this case, she is performing an act on him, right? She's not, he doesn't create a bill of divorce and give it to her. She creates a declaration of refusal and pushes him away. So here she is performing an act on him as she says, I do not desire you and I do not want you, indicating it is you who I do not desire, but I may desire that brother. Rav Asi said, if she refuses this yavam, she is permitted even to him if she changes her mind. And the Gemara asks, well, shall we say that he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Oshaya, who said she cannot refuse his levirate bond, and since the bond still exists and is not dissolved by her refusal, she is consequently permitted to engage in sexual relations with him in order to consummate it and create yibum. But the Gemara rejects this. No. Rav Asi's opinion is consistent with that of Ula, that the refusal of a levirate bond is effective because it annuls the original marriage. So in the case of one yavam who had no additional brothers, she can indeed nullify the levirate bond. However, here we are dealing with two yevamim, two surviving brothers, and there cannot be refusal of half a levirate bond. Since she refuses only one yavam, her status as a yavama remains intact, the levirate bond remains intact, and she is permitted to consummate the levirate bond even with the one she originally refused. Very interesting. She refused that one. She said, no, I don't want to be with you, that yavam. Okay, but she still has a levirate bond with the other brother. Until that bond is broken, she actually has a bond with any surviving brothers, and she, would have to annul the original marriage to get rid of that bond, or create or perform chalitza with one of the brothers, and then they would all become prohibited to her. So the Gemara relates, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, a minor girl who refuses this yavam is permitted to the brothers, and they did not agree with him. And the Gemara asked, who did not agree with him? Abaye said it was Rav, as Rav claims that she is forbidden to the brothers. Rav has said, no, it was Rabbi Oshaya who claims that refusal cannot nullify the levirate bond. And some say it was Rav Asi who did not agree with him, since according to Rav Asi, she is permitted to marry even the same brother that she refused. New subject. It is taught in the MIshna, Beis Shammai say, the refusal must take place specifically in the presence of the husband. But Beis Hillel say, no, it could take place in his presence or not in his presence. She just says, I do not want to be with that man. Whether he's standing there or not to hear her declaration, the declaration is effective. She can annul the marriage whether in his presence or not, and that is the law. Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, but didn't the wife of Pishon, the camel driver, refuse him in his absence? And Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai said it has to be in the presence of the husband. Beis Hillel is saying, well, we saw an incident where a woman refused her husband in his absence, and it was deemed a valid refusal. So Beis Shammai answered Beis Hillel, Pishon, the camel driver, measured using a defective standard, and therefore the sages measured him with a defective standard. What does this mean? Right, they're making a little bit of a metaphor here. What do they mean? He measured using a defective standard, as he did not properly take care of the property that she brought into the marriage, right? He was not a proper husband, whether that means that he didn't take care of her or he didn't take care of her property in a financial manner, whatever it was, he's some kind of a negligent husband, and therefore the sages measured him with a defective standard. The marriage in that case was annulled by the sages, and the refusal was not treated as a standard refusal. So according to Beis Shammai, you can't use that incident as your proof. The law still follows Beis Hillel, but that proof is not a satisfactory one, at least in the eyes of Beis Shammai. So the Gemara asks, since this man, Pishon, was consuming the profits from her property, it is obvious that it is speaking of a case where she was married. You don't get entitled to you consume the benefits of the property when you're just betrothed. But didn't Beis Shammai say that a married minor girl cannot perform refusal? And the Gemara answers, in accordance with Beis Shammai's opinion, they tied him in two knots, i.e. the sages punished Pishon in two ways. They permitted the refusal against him to take place in his absence, and they permitted it even though she was already married to him. But according to Beis Shammai, it wasn't her act of refusal that annulled the marriage, it was the court stepping in and doing it. New subject. It was taught Beis Shammai in our MIshna that Beis Shammai say the refusal must take place specifically before a court. But Beis Hillel say it may take place either before a court or not before a court. And we learned in a MIshna elsewhere, in Tractate Sanhedrin on the first page, that chalitza and refusals take place in the presence of three judges. The Gemara asks, who is the Tana who taught this? And Rabbah said, it is Beis Shammai who say that the refusal must take place specifically before a court. Abaye said, actually, you can even say that it is Beis Hillel. For Beis Hillel state only that we do not require expert judges for a refusal, but we do require 3 upright people who constitute a court of laymen. And as it is taught in the Baraisa, Beis Shammai say before a court, and Beis Hillel say either before a court or not before a court. But both this school and that school, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, concede that 3 people are required. Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, validate a refusal in the presence of 2. Right? We saw that to perform a chalitza, you need 3. But a declaration of refusal, according to this opinion, no, 2 is enough. So Rav Yosef bar Manyumi said that Rav Nachman said the halakha, the law, is in accordance with this latter pair of sages. And in fact, what is the law? There is no need for 3 people to validate a minor girl's declaration of refusal. It is sufficient that 2 testify that she refused in their presence. They're not acting as judges, they're acting as witnesses that she made a refusal. And the law is in accordance with the ruling of Rav Nachman. New subject. The Mishnah, our Mishnah states that Beis Shammai say she refuses once and then she doesn't get married again until she's an adult. And the Gemara asks, but didn't she already refuse once? Why must she refuse again? And Shmuel, the Mishnah states that Beis Shammai say she refuses once and then she must wait until she reaches majority and refuse again, and then she can go marry someone else. Oh, interesting. Now the Gemara asks, but didn't she already refuse once? Why must she refuse the same man again? And Shmuel said, Beis Shammai's statement means the refusal does not take effect until she reaches majority and says, I wish to uphold my initial refusal in case she changed her mind in the interim. But the law follows Beis Hillel. She doesn't have to do that. Ula said, 2 different possibilities are taught in this statement of Beis Shammai. Either she should refuse, and then once she has become an adult, she should become betrothed, or she should refuse and marry immediately. She should not refuse and then only become betrothed again. According to Beis Shammai, as a minor, she may not refuse again. So that reading is she can refuse once and then she can go off and get married, but she can't do another refusal until she becomes an adult. Now the Gemara challenges this. Granted, the explanation of Ula is consistent with that which is taught until she reaches majority and marries. That is, until she reaches majority or until she marries. But according to the explanation of Shmuel, the Mishnah should have said until she reaches majority and says that she wishes to uphold the refusal. And the Gemara comments, this phrase is difficult according to this explanation. And that's where we leave off that discussion of Mishnah number 1. Now we go to Mishnah number 2. We're near the bottom of 107b. Who is a minor girl who needs to perform refusal in order to annul her marriage? It is any minor whose mother or brother married her off with her consent. If they married her off without her consent, she need not refuse her husband at all. And she may leave her husband without a declaration of refusal. We didn't quite get that. We thought they married her off. We were kind of assuming it was against her will, and so then she can issue this declaration of refusal. But no, they married her off with her consent, and then she still has the right to make a declaration of refusal and leave the marriage. If they married her off without her consent, all she needs to do is walk away. She doesn't even have to make a declaration of refusal. Rabbi Hanina ben Antigonus says, any girl who is so young that she cannot keep her betrothal, i.e. the money or document of betrothal, safe, right, that this document, any girl who can't be trusted to keep that document of betrothal safe, she does not need to refuse, as the sages instituted marriage only for a girl old enough to understand what she is doing. If she's been married before she can understand what she's doing, then all she has to say is, no, not for me, and leave. She doesn't have to make that proper formal declaration of refusal. Rabbi Elazar says the act of a minor girl is nothing. So that if a minor girl's mother or brothers marry her off, the marriage is essentially invalid. Rather, her status is as though she were a seduced unmarried woman. Therefore, a minor daughter of a non-priest married to a priest may not eat teruma, and the minor daughter of a priest married to an Israelite may continue to eat teruma, right? Because this marriage of the minor girl is not really a marriage. That's why if she's the daughter of a priest, she can continue to eat teruma even though she seems to be married to an Israelite, because she's not really married to him because she's a minor, and vice versa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says otherwise. If there is any obstruction in the matter due to the man, it is as if she were his wife. If there is any obstruction in the matter that is not due to the man, it is as if she were not his wife. And this statement will be explained later in the Gemara. Now, what is the law about being, where did the law end up? About a girl being married off without her consent? A minor girl who was married off by her mother or brother with her consent is considered married by rabbinic law, and she may annul the marriage by means of a refusal. If she was married off without her consent, a refusal is not required. Likewise, if she was married off with her consent when she was a minor so young that she did not know how to keep their document or property of betrothal safe, the refusal is not required because this never was a real marriage to begin with. Gemara on Mishnah number 2. Rav Yehuda said, and some say it was taught in a baraisa, at first they would write a bill of refusal in this manner. I do not desire him, I do not want him, and I do not wish to be married to him. That sounds like a good declaration of refusal. But once they saw that this text was too long, the sages said, this document may come to be confused with a bill of divorce. And perhaps man will err and give a bill of divorce using the text of a declaration of refusal. Therefore, they decreed that one should write for a declaration of refusal like this. On such and such a day, so-and-so, the daughter of so-and-so, performed refusal in our presence. The witnesses sign that. That's it. The declaration of refusal has been done. We are on 108a. The sages taught what constitutes a refusal. If she said, I do not want so-and-so as my husband, or I do not want the betrothal in which my mother and brothers had me betrothed, that's a refusal. Rabbi Yehuda said more than that. Even if she is sitting in a bridal chair, going from her father's house to her husband's house, and she said along the way, I do not want so-and-so as my husband, that constitutes refusal. She's done. Rabbi Yehuda said even more than that. Even if guests are reclining at her husband's house and she is standing serving them drinks as a hostess, and she said to them, I do not want so-and-so as my husband, this constitutes a refusal, even though it is possible that she is merely complaining about the effort that she's expending. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda said even more than that. Even if her husband sent her to a shopkeeper to bring him an article of his, and she said, I do not want so-and-so as my husband, there is no greater refusal than this. They're saying this minor girl, she should not have been married off, right? Really, they're making it easy for her to get out of that marriage. Halachically, legally, she can get out very easily. All she's got to do is say, yeah, in the presence of witnesses, I don't want that man to be my husband. Marriage annulled. It was taught in the Mishnah. Rabbi Hanina ben Antigonus says, any girl who is so young that she cannot keep her betrothal safe does not need to even refuse. So Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Hanina ben Antigonus. It was taught in the case of a minor girl who did not refuse her husband, but who went and married someone else. She didn't perform. Okay, so she was married as a minor with her consent. So she should need a declaration of refusal to annul that marriage. She didn't perform a declaration of refusal. What did she do instead? She just went and betrothed herself to some other man. Okay? Clearly, her intent was not to be married to the first man. And her action of betrothing herself to another man, while she, as a minor, that's why it's permitted, a woman who's married to some man cannot go and betroth herself to another man until she receives a bill of divorce. But a minor girl can. That's what we're learning here. Where am I? Yes. Right? If she was betrothed to another man without performing refusal of... wait a minute, where am I? Yes, here. And it is taught that a minor girl who did not refuse her husband, but who went and married someone else, it was said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, her new marriage constitutes her refusal, as she made her state of mind known, that she does not want him, and that is sufficient. Her act of betrothing another man clearly demonstrates that she refuses the first husband. A dilemma was raised before the sages. What is the law if she was betrothed to another man without performing refusal of the first husband? Well, we just learned that it's a valid refusal, just her betrothal. Is her acceptance of the betrothal sufficient to indicate that she refuses the first husband? And the Gemara suggests, come in here and answer from a baraisa. If a minor girl did not refuse her husband, but she went and became betrothed to another man, then, as the sages said, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, her betrothal to the second man constitutes her refusal of the first man. Now, another dilemma was raised before the sages. Do the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera or not? That's a weird question because we just heard that the rabbis cited the law in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera. Why would they disagree with Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera? And further, if you say that they do disagree with him, do they disagree with him with regard to betrothal alone, or do they also disagree with him with regard to marriage? Oh, wait a minute. She's leaving the first husband that she was betrothed to, or she's leaving the first husband that she was married to when she goes and betroths a new guy, all right? So if you say that they disagree even with regard to marriage, is the law in accordance with his opinion, or is the law not in accordance with his opinion? And if you say that the law is in accordance with his opinion, is this only with regard to marriage or even with regard to betrothal? The Gemara cites a tradition. Come in here. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera with regard to both marriage and betrothal. From the fact that he ruled the law, one may derive by inference that the rabbis disagree. So it's like a text maybe became corrupted a little bit. It must have been that the rabbis disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, but the law ultimately followed. Initially, there was a majority that disagreed with him, but ultimately, later sages ruled that the law follows Yehuda ben Betera, and so in a sense, that became the law, and now the majority agrees with that. But still, you should raise the dilemma. Does Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera say that her betrothal to another counts as refusal even when she had initially been married? Or perhaps only if she was betrothed to the first husband but not fully married to him? Come in here. The answer is the daughters-in-law of Abdan rebelled against their husbands. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rebbe, sent a pair of sages to examine them and determine what could be done to rectify the matter. Some women said to these daughters-in-law, "See, it is your husbands that are coming." And they said back to them, "Let them be your husbands. we don't want to be with these men." Rebbe said, "Well, there's no greater refusal than this. What is the case? Is it not that they were already married? And then they were minors, so they could walk away. How did they voice their refusal? Not by giving a declaration of refusal, but by going and betrothing someone else. So is it not that they were already married? But the Gemara rejects this. We don't know that for sure. Maybe they were merely betrothed, but not married. The story cannot establish unequivocally that what the law is in the case when the girl was married. If she can get away without doing a declaration of refusal, but simply betrothing some new guy. So the Gemara nevertheless concludes the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera in all of these matters, even with regard to a girl who was married to the first husband. She doesn't have to give him a declaration of refusal if she goes and betroths another man. New subject. It is taught in the MIshna. Rabbi Elazar says the act of a minor girl is nothing. Rather, her status is as though she were a seduced, unmarried woman. And Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, "I reviewed all the opinions of the sages concerning these matters, and I did not find any person who applied a consistent standard with regard to a minor like Rabbi Elazar did. For Rabbi Elazar portrayed her as a girl walking with her husband in a courtyard who stands up from his bosom after engaged in intercourse with her, and she immerses herself to become ritually pure in the mikveh, And then she partakes of teruma by evening, as if there were no marital bond between them, and as if she, the daughter of a priest, could continue to partake of teruma. Meaning that she's the daughter of a priest who married an Israelite, but she's a minor, so she can walk away from him whenever she wants and continue eating teruma because she's the daughter of a priest. Now, it is taught in the Baraisa that Rabbi Eliezer, as opposed to Rabbi Lazar, says the act of a minor girl is nothing, and therefore her marriage is not valid. And her husband has no rights to items that she finds, nor to her earnings, nor does he have the right to annul her vows. He does not inherit her assets if she dies, and if she dies, he may not become ritually impure on her account if he is a priest, i.e., through his presence in the same room as her corpse. And the principle is she is not his wife in any sense, except that she must perform refusal in order to marry someone else. Rabbi Yehoshua says in the case of a minor whose mother or brother married her off, her husband has rights to items that she finds and to her earnings, and he has the right to annul her vows, and he inherits her assets if she dies. And if she dies, he must become ritually impure on her account, even if he is a priest. And the principle is she is his wife in every sense, except that she can leave him by means of refusal and does not require a bill of divorce. Rebbe said the statement of Rabbi Eliezer appears to be more correct than the statement of Rabbi Yehoshua, as Rabbi Eliezer applied a consistent standard with regard to a minor, while Rabbi Yehoshua applied an inconsistent standard. And the Gemara asks, in what way is his standard inconsistent? And the Gemara answers, if she is his wife, she should require a bill of divorce from him. According to Rabbi Eliezer, too, there appears to be an inconsistency, as if she is not his wife, she should not be required to perform refusal either. So the Gemara answers, but shall she leave with no ritual at all? Some sort of act is required to indicate that their relationship is permanently severed. Rabbi Eliezer has a consistent standard according to which the marriage of a minor has no substance, and to dissolve it, she need only indicate that she does not want her husband. Rabbi Yehoshua is inconsistent in treating the relationship as a marriage in all legal respects, even though it can be dissolved so easily. New subject. The MIshna stated, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, if there is any obstruction in the matter due to the man, it is as if she were his wife. If there is any obstruction in the matter that is not due to the man, it is as if she were not his wife. So the Gemara is now going to explain that statement. What are the circumstances of an obstruction due to the man and an obstruction that is not due to the man? And Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, if someone proposed marriage to her and she said, I do not wish to marry on account of so-and-so, my husband, this is an obstruction that is due to the man. When she declined the proposal, she made it clear that she views herself as his wife. But if she says, I do not want to marry because the men suggested to me are not suitable for me, this is an obstruction that is not due to the man, and she is not considered to be his wife. Abaye, meaning, right, if she says, like, she could leave this marriage because she's a minor. She could leave at any time and marry someone else, right, with a declaration of refusal. If when they bring someone else to her that maybe she should prefer to marry, if she says, I can't marry that guy because I'm married to this guy, right, then that is from him, right? It's as if she's married, fully married to the first guy. But if she says, no, I don't want to marry that guy because I don't like him, well, what she's saying is, but if I did like him, I could marry him, and I do not consider myself married to this first guy that my mother gave me to, and that's like an act of refusal right there. Abaye bar Avin and Rav Chanina bar Avin both say, if the minor's husband gave her a bill of divorce, this is an obstruction that is due to the man, since in presenting the bill of divorce, the marriage is being treated as a valid marriage that now is being ended by a divorce. Therefore, from then onward, he is prohibited from marrying her close relatives, and she is prohibited from marrying his close relatives, and as a divorced woman, she is disqualified from marrying into the priesthood. However, if that marriage ends because she gives a declaration of refusal, this is an obstruction that is not due to the man. It's an obstruction coming from her. Therefore, she's annulled the marriage, and he is permitted to marry her close relatives, and she is permitted to marry his close relatives, and she is just not disqualified from marrying a priest because she's not a divorcee. That marriage was annulled by her declaration of refusal, and it's as if it never existed. And finally, because I'm just one verse away from being done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. The Gemara challenges, but it is taught explicitly below in the following Mishnah, if a minor girl refuses a man, he is permitted to marry her close relatives, and she is permitted to marry his close relatives, and he has not disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. If he gave her a bill of divorce, he is prohibited from marrying her close relatives, and she is prohibited from marrying his close relatives, and he has disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. Since the difference between refusal and a bill of divorce is already addressed in the following Mishnah, why is the same ruling repeated here? And the Gemara answers, the following Mishnah is explaining the latter part of this Mishnah. And the following Mishnah we're going to read on Friday. All right, that'll be Mishnah number 3 in the middle of page 108. And God willing, on Friday, we'll meet at the regular Friday time, noon Pacific. We'll do the second half of page 108 and 109, and then we'll be fully caught up despite missing tomorrow's class. No class on Thursday. No class tomorrow, Thursday. We meet again on Friday at noon. Okay. Questions on page 107 and the first half of 108. Frank Broidy, what is the legal age from minor to adult? Basically puberty, right? So just like for these purposes, once she's hit puberty, like 12 years old, the age of bas mitzvah, she becomes, it still seems crazy young to us. Ancient world, where lifespan was often as short as 40 years of age. They did have marriages that were very young. Sharon, what if the only redeeming brother-in-law is also a minor? Great question. Can a minor male perform yibum or chalitza? Didn't we have that? And I think that what they said was no, right? That the actions of a minor girl actually have more significance and she has more rights than a minor male, right? Because the Torah treats it differently. So a minor man cannot perform yibum or chalitza. They have to wait for that boy to come of age before they can do chalitza with him. But a minor girl can perform chalitza. Carolyn, was Rachel a minor versus Leia? I don't know that we have any reason to believe that, right? So she's asking about Jacob when he intended to marry the younger sister, which was Rachel. And then her father said, oh, we don't do that. We don't marry off the younger girl before the older girl. So you have to marry Leia, and then you can marry Rachel. Now, under Torah law, you cannot marry two sisters. How is Jacob allowed to marry both Rachel and Leia, Rachel and Leia? Well, that happened before the Torah was given. Now, we also have the teaching that our patriarchs kind of instinctively obeyed the Torah as much as possible. But they didn't have that teaching. They didn't have that prohibition. That story's in the Torah. But we do not learn from it that a man may marry two sisters. That's specifically prohibited in the Torah. But the question, was Rachel a minor? I haven't seen a midrash to that effect. I've never heard that was the case. So if you find a source on that, let me know. And Sharon, it is clear if Rebecca was of the age of majority or not. The actions of her mother and brother, Lavan, sound very much in line with this teaching with regards to the right of refusal. I mean, they did ask Rivka, right, Rebecca, do you want to go with this man? And it was, her family that sort of gave her to go. I mean, again, these laws hadn't been given yet, but just in terms of was the tradition consistent with the Torah in this regard? I mean, I don't know I don't know that Rivka was a minor. Do we know that? I don't know. I don't know that we know that she was a minor. If you see a source for that, let me know. But still, the family would have to agree whether she's a minor or not. That's a different question, right? Now, do we know that her father was dead and that's why Lavan was doing the speaking? I'm not actually so sure of that. I feel like a dim memory that her father was alive, but somehow let his son Lavan, Rebecca's brother, do the talking. But I'm not sure about that. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again on Friday to do page 109 and the second half of page 108, and then page 109. Oh, Nina's typing in that I heard she was 3, that Rebecca was 3 years old. Really? Wow. Well, I'd like to see a source for that. Okay, my friends, that's what I've got. See you on Friday. Have a terrific couple of days.